What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back with the Hometown Commander. Back creating another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the commander in front of us on my quest to outbrew the Magic world. Today we're continuing our route through the Bloomborough precons. We're doing my update, my deck brew each day, as well as the $50 upgrade for the precon, which will be down in the description for you below if you want to watch that. But today we're taking a look at Bello, Bard of the Brambles, a 3-mana Gruul Raccoon Bard. This is during your turn, each non-equipment artifact and each non-aura enchantment you control with mana value 4 or greater is a 4/4 elemental creature in addition to its other types, has indestructible, haste, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. I'm gonna keep it frank for y'all. I'm in love with this card. I think it's great. It gives you everything I think that you want out of a Gruul deck. When we start to talk about the things that we're going to animate, I think you'll start to understand, well, why I, as a Gruul player, love this card, but why I think this deck is going to be very difficult to deal with in the long term. I didn't even put all of the kind of nasty things you can do with this in there. There's been a lot of combos that have been realized with the deck, and there's a lot of things we can do. But we're going to talk about the things we want to animate, the things that we want to make into those 4/4s. I decided to spin the deck a little bit more towards enchantments because there's so many great enchantments we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about some ways to get value from enchantments, drawing cards, things like that. And then we're a Gruul deck. We want to get stuck in. We want to win the game via combat. And we're going to talk about how we're going to do that as well. But as far as things we want to animate, man, there were so many great choices. Things like a Chroma's Memorial make a ton of sense. Creatures have flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, haste, and protection from black and red. At minimum, just flying and trample are going to lead to us probably turning all our creatures into brutality for our opponents, but first strike helps a ton, so does pro black and red. The Great Henge, probably one of the most popular green artifacts of all time, feels great here, and not only because you get to turn it into a 4/4, but because you get its abilities, the mana, and the pulse and pulse encounter and drawing a card. The cool part is as long as Bello is out, any of the artifacts or enchantments that fit its ability are going to enter the battlefield as a creature, meaning the Great Henge would put a counter on it and draw you a card, which is really cool. But before I go too much further, I think the thing that really makes Bello interesting, in my opinion, is it's only on your turn. That might throw some people off because they're going to be worried about how do I block with the deck. But I think more or less what's probably going to happen is people are going to have to start figuring out how they're going to block you and be a lot less worried or more worried about taking Bello off the table than they are going to be worried about your enchantments or artifacts in specific. But I think it's interesting and it kind of helps protect them in a sense, right? Because they're not creatures on your opponent's turns, meaning their board wipes are a little bit less effective as long as we can replay Bello and have Bello ready to go. And the Immortal Sun just feels great here. Players can't activate Planeswalker's loyalty abilities. We only have one Walker on the list. That is a little awkward, but that's okay. Beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card. Spells we cast cost 1 less to cast. All of our creatures get +1 +1. Again, just House of Value for 6 mana. That's going to end up being one of those elementals. The Skullspore Nexus seems like a slam dunk, especially because it can get reduced by X, for X is the greatest power among creatures we control. Whenever one or more non-token creatures we control die, we create a green fungus dinosaur creature token with base power and toughness equal to the total power of those creatures, meaning that whenever one of our enchantments does find a way to die via an effect, or any of our other creatures die in combat, we're getting tokens back. And then we get pay 2 to double target creature's power till the turn. With them having indestructible on our turn, it's going to make that slightly harder for them to die, but it is still possible. But what I like here is that if Bello dies or something else dies, we're still going to get something left around for it. And then we're going to start talking about just the absolute onslaught of enchantments that our opponents are, and that was a pun for the next card, but the absolute onslaught of enchantments our opponents now have to deal with. Berserker's Onslaught. All of our attacking creatures now have double strike. All we need to do is pair this with Trample, and this is going to get brutal for our opponents to deal with. City on Fire. If a source we control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals triple that damage instead. We do have the Convoke to make it a little bit easier to get out, but again, now our 4/4s are effectively 12/12s, especially if we can get the interactions with Trample. Fire Emancipation. If a source we control would deal damage to a permanent player, triple that damage instead. Gruul War Chant, giving all of our creatures +1/+0. And Menace, Sight of the Scale Lords. Beginning of combat on our turn, creatures with toughness 4 or greater get +2/+2 and vigilance until our turn. So you can start to see as we pair these things together, Our goal is just make our board unbearable to deal with. Street Riot, +1/+0, and Trample for all of our creatures on our turn. On Civil Unrest would pair well with things like Great Henge, but it's going to be good for some. Non-token creatures we control have a Riot, so they come within our choice of +1/+1 or Haste, a counter or Haste. If a creature with a counter on it would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead. So if we wanted to invest in better ways to get +1/+1 counters on all of our creatures, this would work with Uncivil Unrest even more. But we do have ways to do that. Well, we're not going to talk about it in this presentation, but there is other ways to do that. Unnatural Growth at the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control, turns our 4/4s into 8/8s. That's just a small cross section of the enchantments that we have access to that we're just going to use to barrel our opponents and just try our best to just run through them. But let's talk about how we're going to kind of take advantage of the enchantment matter stuff. You have things like Eidolon of Blossom. Whenever it or another enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, we get to draw a card, which is pretty great. Sanctum Weaver taps for X mana, where X is the number of enchantments we control. Setessan Champion has that same constellation ability, but it says whenever one comes in, you put a counter on it and draw a card. So now you kind of have that benefit there. The cool part about Eidolon of Blossoms is it will be a 4/4 instead of a 2/2 because of Bello's ability, because it is an enchantment, which is pretty cool. Weaver of Harmony, other enchantments get +1/+1, and then we can pay green to copy target activated or triggered ability from an enchantment source. Kind of cool. That could be really fun, and it could copy a lot of other abilities like that on Natural Growth, or just there's a bunch of enchantments in the deck we might want to copy. Wild Seer, the alternate commander from the precon, feels pretty cool. Whenever we cast enchantment spells from our hand, they have Cascade. I mean, we could potentially get another enchantment or another key piece on the board to take advantage of. And then enchants its presence. Whenever we cast an enchantment, we draw a card. Again, there's not a ton of this in the deck. It's not our main goal, but we'll happily use them to support our main game plan. So we talked about the things we want to animate. We talked about how we're going to take a little bit of profit off the enchantments because, again, most of the things we're trying to animate are enchantments in the deck. But let's do the gruel thing. Let's get stuck in. This deck includes a printing of one of my favorite green creatures of all time, in Goreclaw, Terror of Calcesma, a creature that says whenever it attacks, creatures with power 4 or greater get +1/+1 and trample on a turn. This works really well with all of our elementals that Bello makes because now they're 5/5s with trample. Nylea, God of the Hunt, just gives all of our creatures trample. And this brings up a fun thing that we need to talk about when it comes to creatures that are both these Theros gods that are creatures but they're enchantments. Because its ability says as long as our devotion to green is less than 5, it isn't a creature. Well, what effectively we've learned on the back end is that it depends on which is out first. If Bello is out first and Nylea comes in, Nylea won't turn into a creature. But if Nylea is out first and then Bello comes in, Bello will turn it into a creature. So we want Bello to be the last timestamp of the two of which has gone in, and then Nylea can turn into a 4/4. The other problem is that if Nylea turns into a creature by itself, it still will become a 4/4, unfortunately, because of Bello. But that's okay. I still think the trample itself is more than worth having in here. We're playing a couple extra turn spells. The first is Overpowering Attack from the newest Assassin's Creed set. Untap all creatures you control that attack this turn. If it's your main phase, there's an additional combat phase. And then Great Train Heist, which for 4 mana can give us additional combat, but also gives us things like First Strike or the ability to get some tapped treasures. We have Garruk's Uprising there. In the middle, whenever a creature with power 4 or greater comes in, we draw a card. This is great with Bello because as long as Bello is out, this means anytime one of those enchantments that could be animated comes in, we're going to draw a card. Creatures have trample, and then whenever it comes in, if we have a creature with power 4 or greater, we draw a card. So just card draw plus trample feels great. And then Rhythm of the Wild, giving all of our non-token creatures that come in our choice of either a +1/+1 counter or haste. And I think that that's an important ability because even though Bello does give them haste when they come in, or when they're on our side of the battlefield, having the ability just to give them a +1/+1 counter will make sense, and then Rhythm of the Wild can hand haste out to the rest of our creatures if need be. Well, I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck is ever complete. This is my version 1.0 version of the deck, and I will say this is a deck that I'm going to probably take and brew for myself. So we'll talk about Bello again soon. This isn't the only time we're going to see it on the channel. But there's three cards I was looking at in the process of making this deck that I think deserve their shot, and one of them is going to immediately go into my version of the deck. Gruul Warplow is just an artifact that gives all of our creatures trample. It has an ability to turn itself into a creature, but we really kind of don't need it because Bello's just going to make it a creature. But hey, here's another way to give our creatures we control trample. Bedlam is a card that I expect to see in a lot of Bello decks. I don't know how I feel about it yet. Just creatures can't block feels like it's what we want, right? That means effectively our elementals are going to get even better because no one can block. One thing I'm not sure of on Bedlam yet is, do we want to make an arms race with the rest of the table? I think in a lot of games we're going to profit from that arms race, but I think it is something where you need to be slightly careful with an ability like Bedlam to make sure that you understand what process you're creating in the game and hoping that no one else can take more advantage of it. And then Shared Animosity, whenever a creature we control attacks, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking creature that shares a creature type with it. Shared Animosity is going to go right in my version that I'm working on for myself, because I think that added +1/+0 is going to be really good, especially when we pair it with Trample and some of those other abilities. The reason it didn't go in this list was I just ran out of time. You know, it's tough when you're brewing and you're working on lists and you've got those cards coming in and out and you're trying to find those ratios. I wanted to kind of focus on more things to animate, and I feel like I lost a slight amount of focus on the ways to buff ours. So my hope for my brew for myself is to focus a little bit more on the things that can buff our board, and then maybe in a month or so we can come back to Bello and I can kind of give you my thoughts on that. But let's get into our play tests. Let's have some fun. Our first one, we're keeping a 3-lander with Fanatic Aronis, Reign of Riches, Orin Frostfang, which gives all of our creatures Death Touch that attack, and whenever a creature we control does damage to a player, draw a card, and then Gruul Warchant. So we have a good mix of enchantments we can animate, some ramp, some staying power, and 3 mana. And remember, Bello's 3 mana, so I see a great look here. Fanatic Aronis into Bello, into probably something like Gruul Warchant, so I like it. Let's do it. Turn 1, we'll get that Sheltered Decadent tapped. Again, nothing we can do turn 1. No point in waiting out this tap land. We might as well do it now. Turn 2, get that Fanatic Aronis down. Mainly because as soon as we get one of these enchantments down, it's going to turn into being able to tap for 4 green mana because they're going to have power 4 greater. So this is going to lead us to a turn 2 Bello. A turn 3 Bello, which is great. It was probably what we wanted to do anyway. But I'll take it. 3 mana for Bello. I don't really have anything else to do, which is okay. But now Bello's down, and now we can work towards getting those enchantments down and getting good value from them. Turn 4, we put down another forest, and we draw Besaiger Reaches Skyward. This is an interesting saga, because on the front, search your library for up to 2 basic forests, put them into your hand. You put up to 1 target land from your graveyard on top of your library on the 2, and on the 3, you exile it and flip it over. And on the backside, this is a 0/0 that gets +1/+1 for each land we control. And remember, with Bello, this is going to become a 4/4. So the backside's great, right? Because the backside's just going to get really big. Now, my thought here is to play Reign of Riches. The reason is when Reign of Riches comes in, it's going to make us 2 treasures, right? And Reign of Riches says whenever you use a mana from a treasure to cast a spell, that spell has Cascade, which means next turn we can start cascading from any of the spells we cast, which seems like a very great ability. It's going to come in as a 4/4 with haste and indestructible, and I'm going to immediately try to point it somewhere. If it connects, I draw a card. If it doesn't, he doesn't. For purposes of this playtest, we'll say I didn't connect, somebody blocked it, which is possible in turn 4. But now, Fanatic Aronis is online to tap for 4 green mana, and I think we're going to have a great turn this next turn. Turn 5, the highest CMC spell in my hand is Orin Frostfang, and I think that's what I'm going to try to do. I would tap Fanatic Aronis for 4, pay a treasure, and cast Orin Frostfang. The reason here is now I have my lands up if I want to play other things. And number 2, now I'm going to cascade from this Orin Frostfang. And the cascade is 5. So I need something 4 or less. And I'm going to get to cast it for free. And it is an Ezekiel's Chariot, which is great. Because Ezekiel's Chariot's actually going to come in and become a creature, right? Because of Bello. And here's the other thing that I didn't put a lot of stock in. but I think some people could put a lot of stock in is Bello's going to make all vehicles creatures on your turn as long as they fit the requirement. And for some people, that's going to be a really popular thing. So we get Azika's Chariot coming in with haste. It's going to make its 2 cats when it comes in. Now his haste is indestructible, and when it attacks, we create a token of a copy of target token you control. We want to make more treasures, right? Potentially get more cascades. Orin Frostfang doesn't have haste, but that's okay. We've still got 4 mana left. I mean, I love the idea of something like Gruul War Chant here, because now they all have Menace. So now they're 5/4s with Menace. We move to combat, attack with 1, 2, 3. Death Touch, Menace, Indestructible, Haste. I mean, now you're talking about just probably difficult creatures to block. I would try to put as many of these at people that don't have blockers so I can draw off a Bello. But let's just say with the 3 of these guys attacking with... and I might even attack with Bello too. Death Touch and Menace might make it even worth blocking as well. It won't be able to draw off of its ability, but it will be able to draw off of Orin's ability. So let's say with the 4 of these, I only connect with 2 of them. I think that's probably a fair ratio. I might even be able to argue that it might be more than that. But when Azika's Chariot attacks, I'm going to make the treasure. Let's say I connect with 2 of them. That means I draw 4 because of Orin Frostfang and then Bello. We'll say we connected with 2 of these guys, so we get to draw. Well, I have 4 mana left. Let's use 1 of it for Soul Ring. Let's use a couple of it for Rhythm of the Wild, right? Let's just try to get these support pieces down, so that way next turn we can take another big turn. And then I don't think I played a land this turn, so we'll play the Mountain. I actually realized Mountain could have gotten me the Immortal Sun. But that's okay, that is what it is at this point. Now we're just setting up for a great turn next turn. Turn 6, yes, turn 6, we are probably in the risk of... We're one real like buff our entire board away from just probably knocking somebody out this turn. This is kind of a fun one. Cradle Clearcutter is a 6 mana 3/6 that has Prototype. We could pay the Prototype cost to have it come down as a different size, but it says add an amount of green equal to its power. What's cool about the Clearcutter is for 3 mana I get a 4/4 because of Bello's ability that can tap for 4 either this turn or on future turns, so that's not a bad one. I kind of like the idea of the Immortal Sun, right? I'm going to give it a +1/+1 counter because of Rhythm of the Wild. Remember, it has haste because of Bello. I would tap Fanatic Aronis for the Clear Cutter. It's going to come in with a counter on it because of that, and it would have cost 1 less. But now we have a buff from the Immortal Sun. So now all of our creatures have +2/+0 and Menace as long as they attack. And I'm probably just gonna make a massive attack. Probably now that I'm thinking about it, I should have cascaded off the Immortal Sun, but oh well, we're far past that at this point. Move to combat, make the copy of the creature with Azika's Chariot. Attack. I would attack with Bello. Just attack with everything out here. I always find personally in a turn like this, turn 6, if I have enough attackers, I would try to target one person here. Some people may not like that, but the reason I say that is because spreading the damage does work in some games, but we're at the point where at turn 6, someone may have a board wipe waiting for us, and I would probably try to target the deck I think I'm either the most afraid of or is the most probable type of board wipe and knock them out now. I have 6 attackers with Menace, 7 attackers with Menace. I have a hard time believing on turn 6 that one player can block me out. And if they only have 1 or 2 creatures, well then maybe I can split this up at 2 people. Yes, I run the risk of drawing a ton of cards here, and I'm fully willing to pitch half my hand if I have to, because I think this turn we can knock at least 1 person out, maybe even 2. And now we just set up for next turn to do this again and make it even worse for our opponents. We'll go to another playtest. Keeping a 3-lander with a Farseek, Rampant Growth, Stomp, which can do a bite style effect on one of our opponents, and then some Chaos Warp, some removal. I like it. The only thing we're missing from this hand is an enchantment or an artifact to animate, but we have lots of ramp, and I think we need to give it. I start trying. Turn 1 we draw Berserker's Onslaught. Great. So we're already kind of getting started towards the good things. I'll game trail here. I can reveal these if I want to, but I got nothing to do turn 1, so we don't even necessarily need to if we don't want to. Turn 2 playing the Mountain. I'm just gonna get some ramp out of the way. Again, we can play Bello next turn, and we have that ready to go. But I kind of want to just get some ramp out of the way, get a 3rd land down, kind of get that process started. Next turn we can Bello if we want to, or we can do something else, but hey, now we're up a mana, right? Going into our turn 3, we're at 4 mana. Let's think about this. I can Bello, but I would do nothing else this turn. I can Idle on a Blossoms to just draw a card. I could Rampant Growth if I want to. I mean, there's a couple options here. I don't think that any of them are the best. I mean, I like the idea of Bello here. The only reason is, well, I actually, thinking about it, I should have put this Stump on the backside. Right, bring it in tapped, play Bello this turn so I can play the Forest next turn and have Berserker's Onslaught. That's probably what I should have done, right? If I was going to play Bello. I just wasn't sure. Play Bello, pass the turn, come back for turn 4, play the Forest. Now we have 5 mana. Mishra's isn't a bad choice. Whenever you cast an Historic spell, you can pay 1. If you do, create a copy that's a token that's a copy of Mishra's. Or we play the Berserker's Onslaught. So remember, with Historic, that's artifacts, legendaries, and sagas, which we do have another one in our hand, but I kind of like the idea of just the Onslaught here. And then take an attack. Bello has Double Strike. Berserker's Onslaught has Double Strike. I would guess on turn 4 we should be able to get this Berserker's Onslaught in for damage somewhere. I have a tough time believing that one of our opponents doesn't at least have an attack. Let's say for the purposes of this playtest we do at least hit for damage on one person, which, remember, would be 2 cards, because it's whenever it deals combat damage to a player, and with Double Strike we would draw 2 cards. So great attacks there. We move into our turn 5, play that command tower for turn. I mean, there's a couple options here. We could take the turn and just like double ramp, make it even bigger for next turn. We could do the Immortal Sun, get a little buff to our creatures. We could get Orin Frostfang for more draw. I kind of like the idea of just the Immortal Sun here. Players can activate Planeswalker's abilities. We draw an additional card. Spells cost 1 less to cast, get a big buff, and again, take another attack. I have a tough time believing, again, on turn 5 that at least one of these couldn't get through, so we'll just say we draw 2 there. And no mana left. Unfortunately, we didn't draw a land, so I will just pitch one of these ramp spells. I mean, I think we're not going to need them at this point. And all we need is one more land for something like Chroma's Memorial, and I think this game's just damn near over. Turn 6, no land, but remember, we do have 6 mana because of the... Sorry, we do draw an extra one because of the Immortal Sun. And I would just put a Chroma's Memorial down here. 6 mana for it seems perfect. Flying, First Strike, Vigilance, Trample, Haste, and Pro Black and Red. And we just take a massive attack. We either have one person hit 8, 16, 4, 8, 12. So we have somebody take 24 if we want in the air. Or we've spread them out. Whatever we choose to do, I think unfortunately we're just going to end up drawing like 6 cards here. But I think that's what we want to do. With even Bello now being in the air, having Double Strike, that's what? 4, 8, 12, 15. So that's 30 damage. Depending on who we attack last turn, we might just knock somebody out here and draw 6. And I mean, I think I probably just... Right, pitch down to hand size, try to keep some relevant things in hand. I don't think I need the Soaring at this point. Don't know I need Island at this point. And now on turn 7, if no one's interacted with our board, we draw an extra card, right, because of the Chroma's Memorial. We now get Aggravated Assault. And this is the thing I didn't talk about in the presentation, is we do have a natural combo in the deck with Aggravated Assault and Nature's Will. Nature's Will is an enchantment that says whenever a creature deals combat damage to an opponent, you tap all their own lands and untap all of yours. Aggravated Assault says for 5 mana we can untap all creatures we control and get an extra combat. And effectively, as long as we have 5 lands, this is going to lead to infinite combats. I didn't talk about it in the presentation because I know some people get kind of wonky about infinite combats, but it's a way to potentially end the game. And at this point with, 8 mana, Aggravated Assault actually might even be lethal, because if I play this for 2 mana, right, because of the Immortal Sun, it's not a creature, but that's okay. It leaves me with 6 mana left over. I take an attack here. Remember, I said I have 30 in the air total with Double Strike. I have a feeling I'm probably knocking somebody out. If I'm not... Oh, it's not 30, right? It's 5, 10, 15, 18. It's 36, I'm sorry, because of the Immortal Sun. I have a feeling I knock somebody out, draw 6, go to my main 2, aggravated assault the other 5 mana, and I knock the other person out. So we're on turn 7, knocking the table out. Again, this is just a playtest, right? We don't know what our opponents are going to do, but this just goes to show you kind of some of the power that Bello can do when you start giving it enchantments that just buff your board. But let me know, what do you think of Bello down in the comment section below? I'm super excited to try this deck out. It is the pre-con that I'm going to be buying for myself and going to be testing out. I always try to pick one per set to have some fun with, but Bello is one of those decks that speaks to me directly. I love my Gruul decks. I love my Gruul attacking decks, and this one just feels great. So let me know what you think of Bello down in the comment section below, and I will catch you guys next time.